and today I have Raia, leader of the customer success team for the Americas at Nozomi Networks. He spent a range of time leading and growing customer success departments across the US. And I'd love for you just to introduce yourself and just tell me a bit about your journey from the technical side into the customer success side and why it was just a logical move, of course.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me, Paris. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yeah, like a lot of folks who've moved from some of their field to customer success, my journey is pretty organic in that I was mostly working in, the tech landscape. And the last 2 years or so that I was doing that, I was mostly working with like long-term partners on strategies. And I didn't know what this part was, but I wanted to do that part all day long. So I started to look around to see who are these people who are doing strategies around customers being successful, seeing customers' goals out. And it was kind of around the time, around like 2009 or so, that customer success as even a term happened. So I started to look around for like local groups, things on the internet I could find. And I found a company locally. At the time I was living in Portland, Oregon. And they had really set up their entire company based off the kind of the foundations of customer success. So it was like, if I'm going to learn, I want to learn there. And that company was Jive Software. And after a long campaign of trying to get in, I think it was about a year from date of apply to when I was actually hired. I was actually hired there. So I got to learn from what I would say are some of the best in the industry. In fact, the person I learned directly under, Aaron Thompson, who's absolutely amazing, went on to do Success Hacker, which he does today quite successfully.
And I guess during your time at Jive, then you was getting into the customer success, nitty gritty, and you were kind of learning what that role entails. And for many that don't know Jive, what is it that they actually specialized in, and how was that useful for you in your journey to kind of shifting into other areas of tech?
Yeah, so Jive Software at the time did collaboration software, so kind of like intranets, right? So I think the biggest thing that really helped me, not only learning from Aaron directly, but the kind of accounts that I had. So a lot of the accounts that I took on were some of the biggest accounts there that were incredibly intricate, detailed. One of the accounts that I had on average had like somewhere between 30 and 40 people joining weekly calls. So really complicated. I think they had the highest time they had something like 16 instances, right? So just a lot of juggling and organization. So I think it just kind of put me through the ringer, right? Like it threw me into the deep end of how to do the work that we do.
And if we look back to customer success, we go back to 2005, 2010, moving towards the 2015, it was, really defined slightly different. And I guess, more from a support and a technical perspective, it was, those skills were more important, I guess, especially with regards to software like Jive's at that time. Now we look at customer success, depending on the organizations, they're, defined differently. But would you say that those technical skills were definitely needed for that type of role at that era?
Yeah, so in fact, when I first started, I was a technical account manager. So yeah, that technical part was certainly necessary. And I mean, I think it depends on the software, right? Like some softwares don't really require that much technical expertise, but at least in the fields that I've chose to pursue, they've been very helpful for me. And kind of speaking to the way that CS has progressed, I really see that there's, and this is just my opinion, two very distinct schools of customer success, right? I see one that's really morphed into just sales rebranded, right? They use a lot of the same actions and motions. The personas are very similar. The way that they're paid is very similar. And then the school that I kind of fall into, I look at it more as like a philosophy of customer success, which is different than a traditional sales motion. So what I mean by that is the more philosophical end of customer success is more focused on if you're doing right by the customer, right? Then in the end, you'll have more organic and sustainable growth. It might not always be the fastest, but you'll develop loyalty, right? So yeah, I guess it's a shift in philosophy.
And when we look at customer success and its impact on an organization from a from the outside, I would say, how important would you say it is and fundamental for a growing company to invest in the function of customer success, or CSM as we call it internally?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of this comes down to dollars and cents, right? Acquiring new customers is going to cost you a heck of a lot more, right, than really, nurturing and evolving the customers you already have. It's cheaper dollars at the end of the day, right? Especially with the way things are economically today, right? Holding on to those customers and expanding them is going to cost you far less than trying to bring in new logos. So part of it's just the math of it, right? Did that answer your question, Ferris?
Yeah, it does actually.
Okay.
And just moving on from that and maybe shifting the emphasis away from that slightly, what I wanted to cover with you is, if we look at from a perspective of leadership and when you are working with these accounts, what do you really drum into, the customer success team about how to really grow those relationships? Because, as you said, it's cheaper and it's more effective to work with the customers you already have, but how do you enable your team to do that, and what do you really get them to focus on to grow those relationships and those upsell or cross sell opportunities?
Yeah. So in terms of cross and upsell, right? Kind of going back to those two schools. So going back to the more philosophical end of customer success, right? It's not just what product can I plug in here, but really getting to know their landscape. Like, you're working for their team. What would you advise if you were sitting in that room with them? Right. So understanding their day-to-day operations, understanding where they want to go, in the next year, understanding the pressures from, maybe a level above them, or from the CEO down, right? Really being able to sit in that seat and then finding what solutions are going to be best for their end results versus, can I sell them this product, right? So, yeah, that's kind of my philosophy around how we do upsell and expansion, is just really deeply understanding that customer. And I think that's something that, at least in enterprise CS work, we have the ability to do. With mid-market or, one to many, you kind of lose that portion of it, is that deep understanding of the client. But I think in enterprise level accounts, you really have to.
And if we look at your time at Jive, Terminus, and now at Nozomi, what would you say is the average customer retention, and how do you try to keep it above the levels that are required from leadership? They may have an amount that they say, hey, this is the target of retention. There's a lot of competition, even with good customer relationship, good understanding of what their journey looks like, and helping them along that journey. With new softwares coming out almost every week, how are you able to position a strategy with the team to be able to execute on that and ensure that retention target is achieved and maybe even exceeded?
Yeah. So I will say at Nozomi, I am very blessed that we have a 100% customer retention rate, which I can't say for any other company I've worked for. Not that it's been bad anywhere, but 100% is an amazing achievement, right? And at Nozomi specifically, I think a part of that is that retention isn't just customer success, it is the entire company, right? So from Edgar, the CEO, all the way down, every department, every room I sit in, every decision that's made, there's always this unwavering commitment to the client, right? How will it affect them? Is this good for them? Will it help make their day-to-day operations easier? And I think the fact that at Nozomi, whatever is happening, we can always access all those teams. There's nothing off limits. Like, I've had, you know, executives hop on calls that seem maybe at other companies to be somewhat benign, but they're like, no, it's important to me. And it's genuinely important to everyone that works at Nozomi. And I think that's part of the culture at Nozomi that they've really spent a lot of time curating. To this day, our CEO still interviews everyone, right? Like, he's part of that interview process, which is kind of unheard of.
It is, especially once they get to 200 people plus. It starts to become more of a second line, or so management get involved rather than the C level are really involved. Unless it is an executive position like a director or VP, then they want to sit in and ask some specific questions to see how they're going to navigate the storm. But in terms of key performance metrics, then I'm keen for people that want to get into customer success or are in similar leadership positions. What would you say are key metrics for yourself to really analyze how well the team are doing against the targets, but also how individuals, are learning and developing along the way, and being able to track that and help them with your coaching and, development plans that you probably have in place for them.
Yeah. So as mentioned earlier, churn rate is obviously important to us and something we're focused on, right? Overall, we're looking at things like, CLV, like customer lifetime value, to make sure that we're really having like a long-term impact on the efforts, right? As for like the CSM team, I think we look at it a little bit more broadly, right? So like most CS teams today, we're working with a bigger clientele and not a lot of staff, right? Like there's only so many unicorns you can have, right? So really, I have a team of people who all have really unique strengths, and those strengths really help each of us out, right? So we really weigh on each other. We do a lot of workshops with each other. We do a lot of knowledge share with each other. Like one of the people I work with, he has like 30 plus years in OT cybersecurity, not experience
Wow.
I have. I have another guy whose background is almost all IT, but it is extensive. But he also has a lot of customer success experience. And then myself coming in, having more broader operational experience and a background in setting up teams. So all of us just kind of use that to weigh against each other to help each other. Does that make sense?
Definitely, and it's something that I see very often. I guess that the best teams and the most high performing teams are those that have different skill sets and are able to use those to balance out the team and help each other in different areas. Like you mentioned, you're going to have really technical guys with operational technology experience beyond 20 years, so they've known it from early stages where it was very not it wasn't as mature as it is today, I would say. And now you look at where the companies are really making highly complex solutions where there's a lot of different OT products in the market that are solving different needs. You need to have that, that range of skills collectively in the organization. And I guess going back to something we discussed a little bit earlier, you mentioned the importance of collaboration within the different teams and everyone in Nozomi, chipping into the collective efforts. How if you look at cybersecurity as an as an industry, as I say, how is your team able to facilitate that knowledge sharing and collaboration amongst the customers to create a stronger cybersecurity community, as I call it?
So this is a fun question. So when I first started at Nozomi and I started looking at, there's in customer success, there's metrics that you use to gauge your customers, right? And a lot of those I couldn't use all of a sudden, right? A lot of customers you have zero visibility to. There's things that just aren't as relevant, like stickiness, right? Daily over monthly, like login rates or usage rates. None of those really work. So I had to find like a totally different way to not only understand what these customers were like, but how we could show things like ROI for these customers. So when I first started and really discovered this, I went down the path. I put together a roundtable, a private roundtable of people who work specifically in cyber and in customer success. So I had folks from like Red Canary, Google, VMware, a bunch of other folks. There's about 15 people at this table. And I just asked them these questions like, this is different. Tell me more about working in cybersecurity in customer success. So one, they all acknowledged, yeah, it's a lot like finding a needle in a needle stack, right? It's difficult. You often have not a lot of visibility. And then when things are running really smoothly, there's not really a concrete way to demonstrate that, right? If nothing's happening, how do you demonstrate that, right? So what I learned from that meeting, this isn't necessarily Nozomi, this is just general. For what I learned from that meeting is that CS in cybersecurity tends to lean a little bit more towards orchestrating like teams and projects rather than like diving into like technical nitty gritty. Another big one, which I found probably the funniest, was they're impervious to standard sales pitches. Everyone was like, yes, they're just too sharp. You can't do it. They'll see right through it, which goes back to my my desire for more organic growth. I think it plays really well into this audience. So it might take a little bit longer, but it's certainly a more sustainable approach, right? But overall, right, like the key insight that I found from that meeting was ROI with the customers isn't just about crunching a certain number, but rather like fostering a really deep understanding of their unique challenges and goals, because they're all very, very different. And then in forming like really true partnerships, right? They want to know that you care about where they're going and them being successful, not necessarily that it affects, your paycheck, right?
I understand it. I guess, especially in cybersecurity, I do a lot of discussions with cyber companies, data, AI. So, every customer's needs and their objectives change. But I guess when you look at cybersecurity, there are going to be many decision makers within these organizations that maybe, as you said, haven't always had a 20-year career in cybersecurity. So when we look at, the role that you are doing in providing ongoing education and training, how pivotal would you say that is to ensuring that those customers are really well equipped to leverage the software to its full potential? We talk about return on investment, understanding what their pain points are, but how are you able to, facilitate that ongoing education for them and training?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started at Nozomi, one of the things that I noticed was most of like our marketing material or like information material was all top of funnel, right? Like really speaking to people who were, just now looking at Nozomi, right? And not a lot of like educational material, helpful material for people who are already customers, right? So we do have an amazing academy, right, where people can get like a Nozomi network certified engineer certification. This last year, we also launched one for advanced troubleshooting. So maybe people who are the installers or the admins of it, and then one for security analysts. So there's kind of the educational part, but larger than that, and something I'm probably the thing I'm most proud of this last year is we launched a video series called Marty the OT Guy. So Marty was the gentleman I was mentioning earlier who has this extensive background in OT cybersecurity. And what had happened is when I'd first started, so he built a course which was basically like IT to OT, right? Learning the difference. And I just got so much from this course. And I was like, let's do this every week, right? So every week we would meet with Marty and I would just get these amazing insights. And then I would go and talk to customers and, share some of those insights, or that piece of information helped me understand them a little bit better. And just the feedback I was getting more and more from these customers is more of this, please. Like, I want this all day long. This is useful for us. And so I said, Marty, why don't we just record some of these, right? Like, let's not just share it with the customers we're talking to, but the entire user base. So he was keen and we recorded our first one. And, fast forward a year since our first episode. And today, I think it is our top ranking organic material out there, right? With incredible feedback. He does these lab challenges, and he was over in the APAC region doing some event, and he had people come up to her like, we love the lab challenges. We do it with our team as like a test to see if they're ready for actually working in the product. But yeah, it's been tremendously successful. Some of those learnings we're going to start bite-sizing out and actually putting into the academy. So the academy is not just for, the high-level certifications, but also like tips and tricks or how-tos or quick start guides. So super excited for that. So that should be coming later this year, maybe early next.
I remember when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you was talking about Marty and how, he's the technical guru in the organization for,
Oh yeah.
the products and how they're developing and really knowing the industry well. And I guess even from the outside, when I look into the cybersecurity space, it's evolving every day. Things are changing. And, from a customer perspective, I guess they're always looking to understand any new features, understand how they can, really grow their knowledge of specific cyber, tools that they're using. And I guess when we look at big organizations at enterprise level, usually they're using 3, 4, 5 different solutions for different, requirements, maybe email security, maybe it's, threat intelligence. There's so many different products that they need to pull together. And in terms of those deals that maybe are in the transformation stage, how complex do they really become? And are you involved in driving those from a leadership level, or do you have somebody like Marty who's the expert that will kind of come in and say, hey, this is what we can do with the software, this is how we're going to, integrate Nozomi with, Dragos or with Palo Alto, and this is how we'll, be able to bundle this up in a way that you guys can get the most from from our solution as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a broad understanding just from my self-paced learning. But if something is more complicated, yeah, I'll lean on my team. There are times that I've either brought stuff to someone like Marty, for example, and said, "Hey, you sat in this seat before. What are you actually looking for? What do you need here?" Right? Or there are times where I'll bring him into something that's incredibly complicated, right? And help like having him do that also helps me, right? Like I get to see the way he approaches something or the way he thinks about something. So the next time I do go into something, I have a little bit more learnedness as to how to approach it in the future. So it's a constantly learning thing. In short, I know where my my shortnesses and my weak spots are, and I know who to tap into to make sure that ultimately we're taking care of the customer, regardless of who handles it. It's just us as a team.
That's amazing. And something I'm always intrigued by is people that are making that shift from, another industry or software sector focus to, focusing within the cybersecurity space. And you've done that very successfully. And I know right now, as you probably know, many people in the SaaS space are really, clinging on to cybersecurity and AI is the future. They really want to get into it. And from a perspective of recruitment, which is where I focus normally, I really find it hard as a recruiter to find people transitioning into cybersecurity companies without a background. It's usually a, who what kind of, trade off over there. And from your
Yeah.
perspective, how did you find that opportunity to transition into a cybersecurity organization, and what were the biggest learning curves for yourself? And then we can dive maybe into what you'd recommend for people that are trying to make that transition.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll admit that specific areas to focus on in cybersecurity might not be my forte, but I can tell you my story. So,
Yeah.
for me, during my time at Jive, there was this huge acquisition that resulted in, I think it was something like 90% of the original Jivers leaving the company. And I was one of the few who stayed. And during that period, I had the privilege of collaborating with this remarkable individual. His name's Dave Sunderland, who's my boss. And he tapped me at that time to rebuild this whole team, right? So I think it was about 3 years. We did some pretty amazing things. So from it was 2019 to 2020, we dropped the turnover from 5% down to 3%. We
Wow.
increased revenue by over 25 million, and we developed a whole new standardization, scalability of the entire, um, client success like model, right? So after our success at Jive, we both moved on to other companies. A few years later, I got a phone call, and it was Dave on my phone. He's one of the few people I'm gonna pick my phone up for. I'm a leave a message kind of guy. So he picked up the phone and he said, "Hey, look, I'm building out a customer success team at this company, Nozomi. I'd love for you to think about joining." And at first, I was very hesitant. I was like, "Dave, like, yeah, I have an IT background, but like cybersecurity, that's gonna be a little bit of uplift. OT cybersecurity, that's like a major uplift. Like, I don't know anything about that." So he had me meet with a few internal people to learn a little bit about it. And I think the thing for me that was most moving and really said, "Yeah, I can put a lot of time and energy here," is so cybersecurity in general wasn't really a big pull for me. I was like, all right, someone got blackmailed or something got released. All right. But what I learned about OT cybersecurity, like this is touching the physical world, right? Like you're not just stopping someone from pre-releasing a movie, right? You're stopping someone from turning a water facility into a contamination for an entire community. You're stopping a oil plant from turning into a bomb, right? Like that's real world impact. So for me, that was kind of the driver of, yeah, that gives me enough that I want to dive in. I want to learn more. So after a period of time, I think it was about a month after that, I started a formal interview process, and that is how I joined Nozomi. I will say I am deeply grateful for everyone at Nozomi who took a chance on someone coming in from the outside, particularly without specific OT cybersecurity experience. That being said, I mean, I graduated top of my class. I was a GATE kid. For those who don't know, GATE's the Gifted and Talented program in California. Like, I'm not often humbled by how intelligent people are at this company. I'm often the rube in the room, right? Like I just work with people who are just incredibly smart. And so I learn from them every day. And that really kind of, it's a constant learning cycle for me. It's amazing.
And the saying goes, right, A players want to be around A players. So as you mentioned, if you're around people that you're learning from every day and elevating your skills and knowledge is somewhere that you're not going to be bored, right? You're going to continue to learn, you're going to develop, and you can then pass that on to the team. They're going to be in a position where they're growing, they're learning, and more importantly, they feel like they're having a major impact. So that's something I can really get behind. And if we talk about it from a perspective now, being given that opportunity and doing a great job at Nozomi at the moment. Now, when you are looking to hire, what would you say are the biggest things you look for, bearing in mind that, you maybe haven't necessarily come from security as a background? We all know, sometimes it's who you know, and the great work you do is recognized and people refer you. And we'll dive into it in a moment. But one thing I always talk about on my podcast with my guests is the importance of networking, right? Without networking, it's 5 times harder to get noticed, to get recognized, to reconnect with old colleagues, and you don't know what opportunities can come up from those discussions and those strong relationships that have been fostered.
Absolutely, Paris. So is the question, what do I look for in a CSM?
Yes, that
Yeah.
will be it.
So irrespective of being industry specific, so things that I really look for. So one is curiosity, like a passion for learning, right? Like, do you identify as a lifelong learner? Are you always trying to like stay up to date, find new information? Like that one's really big for me. Another big one is self-motivation, right? Like I I don't want a CSM that's always waiting for instructions. I want them to really be like driven to proactively seek improvements and seek solutions. Tenacity, I think I bring up a lot. I think when people ask me, I probably say that one the most, right? Like I just want them to have that drive to find creative solutions, right? Like I almost want to say like the don't take no for an answer, but I mean from yourself. Like don't say I have a stopping point. Like keep going, or let me know where that no is. And then the last two, these are really personal for me, right? Like I really want to work with people who have a high level of introspection, right? Like people who have the capacity for self-reflection. That tells me they have a willingness to learn from both like really successful experiences and failures, right? And then lastly, I would say kindness. I just like working with nice people, right? But also in that, I think people who are kind tend to also be more empathetic. And I find that empathy is really critical in like fostering trust and strengthening a relationship, right? So I would say those are probably my biggest ones. And then just to kind of to summarize, for me, I have not found that that monetary incentives drive good CSMs. In my experience, really good CSMs will do what is right for the customer, protect the company, regardless if it gives them a financial ding or not. So because of that, I personally really believe in making sure that customer success managers that are at that particular level, like mostly in the enterprise space, have a good, solid base pay because of that. Like, I just don't think they're driven by financial incentives as much as maybe someone in mid-market.
And if they were driven by money, I guess for the most part, they'd probably move into a pure hunting role where there's a 50-50 commission, right? Uh,
Exactly.
so yeah, it is something I see. And I guess there's a lot of benefits from being in a customer success team. As you mentioned, you're not just in it for the short haul, close the deal and move on, but you're really able to maintain and foster those relationships. And that is, what if somebody's really in it for the long haul, that's the kind of role that they want to do. They want to, understand the problems of the customer, be able to really identify those and work alongside them over a period of time, whether the contract is 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, just really being that trusted advisor. And that's, a term that I really love to push, trusted advisor. I think, I talk to a lot of pre-sales executives as well, and they work closely with sales, customer success, product engineering. It all needs to come together, right? Although customer success is a function, really we all work in cross-functional teams, right? You need to across the organization put the resources together to find the solution. And I just want to go back to you mentioned tenacity. You talk about curiosity. And these are two things that, aren't always easy to identify. Some people are good at playing the interview card. How
Mhm.
do you really dive into that and really identify if somebody's really got that natural curiosity and, more importantly, the tenacity that's going to be needed at the top level?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of that I find in the interview process, right? Like, how have they prepped? What research have they done? Are they asking me cookie cutter questions, or have they deep dived into what the product does, or who I am, or who they're interviewing with, right? Like, what research have they done? That kind of, like, no one's told them to do that, right? They can do a cookie cutter interview, but when I see that kind of stuff in interviews, that's really interesting to me, right? And then tenacity, right? Like, uh, just being able to go get it, right? So in the interview itself, like, let's say I said I was going to get back to you on Thursday. It's Monday morning. Someone who has that tenacity is going to be like, "Hey, we'd arranged for you to follow up on Tuesday," right? Like, having that follow up. That also tells me how they're going to manage their customers, right? They're not going to let things just go by. They're going to say, "Hey, this was your end of the bargain, right? Where are we with it?" Right? They're not just going to let things slip by. So again, a lot of that I can find in the interview process, just how they approach it in general.
And going back to something you said right at the beginning of the podcast, where, initially there was like a 1 year interview process from when you first applied to getting the job in one of the previous jobs. How, I think that was at Jive you mentioned early on in
Mm-hmm.
your career. How fundamental was that experience? Now you lead a team to making sure that you're quick off the mark when it comes to, hey, I really like this candidate. I want to get them in the organization right away. I've got that gut feeling. I know that they're the right fit. How important is it now to, not lose top talent because of that delay, that lack of, communication internally to getting the process concluded and wrapped up?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's part of it, but it's hard, right? Depends on which seat you're sitting in. There's also the, as I mentioned earlier, right? Like, even our CEO interviews folks. Like, it is important across the board that you're going to fit in here. There's a reason we have that 100% retention rate, because we really put a lot of work and interest in making sure that you're going to do right by Nozomi. You're going to work well with the team and right by the customer. So on one hand, yeah, a year's a long time, but that year wasn't spent interviewing with Jive. That was, I'd applied. I wasn't on their radar, right? So being tenacious, right? I started to see, like, are they doing meetings in the area that I could go and attend? Can I learn more about them? Is anyone at this company speaking locally? Can I get to know them, right? Can I learn from them in other ways? So part of that, I mean, is basically me networking, right? Like, I'm going to get to know this company because I really want to be there. I was just really, like, incredibly focused. Like, this is where I want to learn. So that year wasn't necessarily spent interviewing. I think once I started interviewing with Jive, it was maybe like, I don't know, a month. So it wasn't too long. Um, but yeah, so from sitting on this side at Nozomi, again, it's kind of a balance. We try not to do any, like, the typical stuff like ghosting. But when we're interested in someone, yeah, we're gonna put them through the cycle. But it's quite a few interviews, but it's because it is really important to us, and I think our results show that demonstratedly works, right?
Amazing. And I know you're involved in some work at Catalyst Software and you're kind of doing some
Mm.
coaching stuff there. I'd love to touch on that and learn a bit
Yeah,
more about that for the audience as well, because that's, something that's really interesting to me, that you're able to juggle your main role and do something on the side to give back and help to coach people in that space that really want to get into it.
yeah. So the Catalyst Coaching Corner, first of all, is amazing. I love that Catalyst has put this together. I think this is probably going to be their biggest one yet. This will be my third time doing a coaching season with them.
Wow.
So basically, how it works is some people set up as players, some people sign up as coaches. For those of us who set up as coaches, we get assigned a person who, what they're trying to do and what our expertise match with, and then we work with them over 3 months to help either, improve their career, or, advance them where they want to be. So yeah, it's amazing. In terms of coaching in general, I will say that the CS community in general is overwhelmingly good in this area, right? I don't see this in a lot of other departments. Customer success is great at, like, hopping on the phone, helping each other, kind of doing really broad networking. I think it just comes with the territory of the kind of people who seek out customer success as a field. Like we like helping each other. So yeah, it's an amazing program. For those of you who haven't seen it, check it out. I think there's still openings for coaches and players. So if it is closed out by the time this comes out, check them out for the next quarter. It's an amazing program.
That's amazing. And in terms of creating an actual official cohort, is that something that's been discussed, not just within Nozomi, but outside within the cybersecurity industry, maybe a cohort where, customer success leaders and, senior members really get together and discuss topics? I know female leadership have chief, pre-sales have the pre-sales collective. So I really think, I know even from a revenue point of view, there's, pavilion as well. So it's really great. I'm not sure if if customer success will fall under that, or if they're looking to kind of create their own cohort where leaders can really develop further and exchange ideas. I think that would be great as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some more private roundtables that I attend that I won't mention the names of, where there are people who are just in leadership, in customer success, do get together to discuss these things. But yeah, it would be nice to see that on a wider scale, right? Yeah, I agree.
And just as we come towards wrapping it up, I've got a few questions personally that I always like to ask to leaders, because as we know, the victories aren't always, known public, but the failures are always the ones that hit, the front page. So I always like to ask, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned, or a few lessons that you've learned along the way leading teams? And what were you able to take away and remedy and make better from those situations?
Yeah. So funny enough, I actually just wrote a LinkedIn post about this the other day because I was kind of reflecting on my journey. And so something really big that happened to me, was during that big acquisition, is the pool of people that I was given to use as my CSM team were all people who had nothing but a technical background. They were customer facing. The soft skills side just kind of didn't exist. And I was really nervous, right? Like for me, prior to that, I'd always hired for the soft skills. I can teach you the tech. That was kind of my philosophy. And now I was in this position uh, where I had to take people who were very technical and teach them the soft skills. And I wasn't sure it was possible. So, I started Googling like teaching empathy, right? Can soft skills be taught? And I learned a lot. So what I did is I developed like kind of a course, if you will. And then from that course, we met weekly. We grabbed feedback, like actual feedback from customers, brought it in there, broke it down, like how it handled it better. I would record some of my calls, bring those in to help them tell me where I could do better, like trying to test that. But I will say at the end of the day, I think almost everyone on that team is still a CSM today. I know one of them is a director, a bunch of them are senior CSMs. I will say that soft skills can be taught. And that for me was very pivotal. Like that was a huge shift in the way that I looked at what we do and how we do it. So it wasn't just soft skills are you have it or you don't, but not only can be learned, if it can be learned, it can be improved, it can be better, right? So I stopped looking at soft skills as just a thing you come with, but something that can actually be cultivated. So that was big for me.
And the soft side, that kind of course that you're running at the moment, how long has it been, going so far, and how big is the group that's involved in it at the moment?
The soft skills. So this is at another company. So I mean, I did it for I guess about 3 years. Um, yeah. So I'm not currently doing that anymore. It's just me developing my own soft skills at this point.
And as you mentioned, I think it's not always a tangible skill, but it is something that can be taught. And so many people do, mistaken that and think, oh, if you don't have the soft skills, it's not something that you can develop. I think it really is with the right people. And going back to, the efforts that you put in, I really, understand your passion to helping others. And if we look at you along your journey, would you say that you had a mentor along your journey to help you? And if not, how crucial would you say it would be if you could step back 10, 20 years, that if you had a mentor, would you have been able to learn a lot more and take a lot more from your career up until this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've had official mentors. I've had people that I have worked with who have taught me a lot, that have been mentors for me, formally or informally, right? So I'd mentioned Aaron Thompson when I first started at Jive. Boy, I learned so much from him, and I'm so grateful that he was kind of the bedrock of how I learned customer success, because he's tremendous. And then today, the gentleman that I work for, Dave Sunderland, right? Like, he's been a tremendous mentor for me in shifting me not just from the customer success side, but he's helped me move into different leadership roles, and kind of is always staging me to understand what's above me, so that I'm getting ready for those next stages. So unofficially, I've had really amazing mentors. They just happen to be the people I work with, and I've been very lucky. I wish there was a program like Catalyst for everyone out there, right? Where people can find official mentors. And to your point earlier, I think particularly among leadership, we don't have a lot of that. Like, maybe someone who's at a director role who's looking to move into a VP, or a VP to COO, right? Like, we don't have a lot of pathways in that area, and I'd certainly like to see development there.
And if we look at, things that are being developed internally within Nozomi, is there any key initiatives that you're involved in personally to kind of drive personal enablement within the team to have, them understand what their path could look like, and really helping them to get those, whether that's, MBR or QBR, and what, initiatives are you really driving within the team?
Yeah. So, I mean, with the team, again, we work really collectively. Um, I think the thing that we try to do more than anything is foster what their drives and interests are, right? Like, we really want to make sure that they're expanding the places where they're interested in. One, it's great for retention, right? And two, I think it helps all of us, right? So things like the development of Marty the OT guide, that was something that he was interested in doing. And, he's really dived into it and made this entire series, right? Um, yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer that question.
No, that's fine. And
Yeah,
I guess I'm going to be sure to tune into Marty,
yeah,
the OT guy, and really check in on, some of the stuff he's teaching. It'll probably teach me, you know, a year's worth of stuff in a couple of weeks, because, reading books, I guess without you know, practically doing things, sometimes it's hard to really engage and understand all of the steps involved. So having
yeah.
somebody that's an expert kind of diluting this into easier, simplified terms, it's always better. And if we go to last question I have for you, then is just
Yeah.
in terms of moving forward in your career, would you say that you're a customer success lifer, or do you see that if there was an opportunity that you would still want to be in a customer success type role, but you could see yourself maybe transitioning slightly?
Yeah, I'm probably a lifer, right? Like, I love it, right? I love the philosophy of it. I love the fact that in customer success, right, you really are working cross functionally. There's not a department you don't touch. Uh, I like being able to see things from that really high level. I like the fact that it's very operational, right? And I like being able to see customers go from, "Hey, I just bought your product," to, "Oh my God, this has changed my life," right? Like, I want to see customers whose day to day is deeply impacted by what we do, right? Like, at least for me, that's incredibly fulfilling. So, yeah, I certainly don't see me stepping out of customer success anytime soon. I think it's an amazing field.
So do I. Last of all, we always have a quick fire question section of the
Sure,
podcast. We've got 3 questions for you. If you're ready, I am.
sure.
So the
Fire away.
first question is, what would be your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, that's a tough one. I might say Dr. Zhivago. Not popular, I get it. I used to watch it with my grandfather. I think it's the only time I ever saw him cry was watching that movie, and so I think it's still just impactful for me.
And do you still get to watch it do you watch it every now and again, or you haven't watched it for years, would you say?
I probably watch it every few years. Yeah. Just as, like, for sentimental reasons, right? I mean, it's a great movie if you've never seen it. But yeah, I get that it's slow and boring, but it's also, yeah, it's an amazing story. It's a great book as well.
And if you had a choice to pick any fast food restaurant to eat from, what would be your favorite?
Yeah, so that'd probably be Burgerville, which I think is only in the Pacific Northwest. Um, so Burgerville is great because they source everything. I think it's within like 60 miles of each individual restaurant, and I like that it supports local farmers, local dairies, and stuff.
Nice. And in terms of if there was a language that you could learn or speak, what would that be?
It would probably be Japanese. Um, One, I think it would be a terrible challenge, but two, I would love to travel in Japan and be able to speak the language, right? A lot of places I travel in Europe, right? People already know English, so it's a nice default language. At least outside of Tokyo, that's not the case, right? So I think being able to explore more of Japan would be amazing. So yeah,
It will be a tough ask, to be honest. My brother speaks a little bit, but I've tried to pick it up, and it's very
it's
difficult
tough.
for me. But yeah, and just last question, which I always have from the last guest to the next guest, is a question for maybe your time at Terminus. It is: have you ever had to enable professional growth across team members in an organization where the entity itself is still finding its own legs? And have you been responsible for a team across various disciplines and been responsible for providing their continued education and professional growth?
Can I ask you to repeat that one more time for me?
No problem. So, have you ever had to enable professional growth across team members where maybe the organization is still finding its own legs and its processes? And how have you been able to provide that education and growth for them?
Yeah. So I'd actually say post acquisition Jive was very much that case, right? Like it was a lot of acquisitions are messy. This was a messy one. Um, so I would say that's probably the biggest time that I've been able to do that. And I think the way that I did that was, it's going to sound corny. Is I generally care about my CSMs, right? Like, so I probably met with them 2, 3 times a week individually, right? Not just to understand what was happening with them, with the company and their growth there, but their personal lives, right? Like, it was important for me to understand what their personal drivers were to see where I could position them. And one of the reasons I did that is I really see oftentimes CS can be kind of uh, the ground floor for people to move to other departments that they're really interested in. So because of that, one of the things that I did was I identified people who maybe really wanted to be in marketing one day or really wanted to be in operations. So I was able to pair them with each of those departments. So not only were they getting uh, that fulfillment for themselves and their like long term career, but also kind of back into the loyalty of working for the team. Did that answer the question?
Definitely, it did, and I liked the approach that you had about putting the team first and really being able to help them to understand the clear goals that they had and helping them to get there. And again, I know you're very busy, Ty, but I just want to thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully maybe even have you on another episode. But for all the guests and myself, thanks again, and it's been a pleasure having you, hearing your insights, your journey, and the things that you really hold close to your heart in the customer success space.
Thanks so much, Paris. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. You take care. And for all the guests, please feel free to tune into episode 4, where we will have Sarah Jones, the Global Vice President of Pre-Sales, joining us on the next episode talking about value selling. Ty, we'll talk soon.
Cheers.